Now, as we consider the jobs market, we want to talk about labor specifically, especially when it comes to unionized labor. As the Vice President Kamala Harris is getting ready with her now running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, to travel from Wisconsin, where they are currently, to Detroit, Michigan later today to appear alongside UAW President Shawn Fain at a rally in Detroit. This, of course, comes after the selection of Walz was widely praised by Fain and other major labor organizations, as he is someone who is seen as very labor friendly. We want to dig into that a little bit deeper now and bring in Sharon Block. She is professor of practice at Harvard Law School, where she's executive director of the Center for Labor and a Just Economy. She's also a former labor advisor in the Biden White House. Sharon, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. It's great to have you. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about how labor friendly Governor Walz really is. Is he more so than Kamala Harris, being part of this Biden administration that claims it is the most union friendly of all time, in a more material way, or are they just singing the same tune on this?
I think that's a great competition to have. I think they both have incredibly strong records for labor. I mean, again, you have Vice President Harris, who has been part of what I think is generally accepted to be the most pro-labor administration ever, or at the very least in generations. I think they've shown that leadership often in very similar ways. Going to Detroit, you have to think about both of them have been very strong supporters for the UAW, both President Biden and Vice President Harris, and then Governor Walz. You have Vice President Harris really showing leadership within the administration on sort of all issues labor, as she did chair the task force on collective bargaining and worker empowerment. But she's also been a really clear leader on looking out for the rights and protecting domestic workers, care workers. I mean, her time in the Senate, she was very much looked to as a leader in the care economy labor issues. And then you have Governor Walz in his state doing some really remarkable advancements in policy for working people. So I think they've both got very strong records. They have shown that sometimes in similar ways and sometimes in slightly different ways.
Well, they're certainly lining up, Sharon. It's not just the UAW, it's the AFL-CIO. AFSCME says it's a big fan of Tim Walz. NEA likes the pick, the AFT. I could keep going down the list here, but of course, the leadership of the union movement is one thing. Remembering that about a third of the membership of the UAW voted for Donald Trump last time. Who's going to vote for Harris-Walz?
So, I think you see in Governor Walz, I mean, he is a union member, right? He spent a fair bit of his adult life as a union member, as a teacher, a public school teacher. So I think that's really going to resonate with union members. But also, we're in a very different place now in this election. Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, they have a record now. And if you look at the record of the Trump administration last time on labor issues, I think this is going to be a very different picture for union members when they go to the polls to make their decision.
Well, what we've heard from not just Donald Trump, but also his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, he has talked a lot about the working man, but he adds in the detail of union or non-union frequently. How should we be thinking about that idea, Sharon? What does that actually mean to you?
I think what that means to me what it should mean is building a working class, a middle class, a working class that can sustain a family, that can provide, security for all workers. Now, I happen to believe, and I think the record is strong, that happens most robustly when workers are in a union. So supporting the labor movement is actually supporting an economy that works for all workers. Union wages, union members get paid more than non-union workers in similar jobs, in similar industries. But when a union is strong in an industry, it actually raises wages for everybody. So strongly supporting the labor movement is actually a way of supporting all workers. And, I think if you look at the Trump record, you just don't see that commitment to either looking out for the economic interests of union members or non-union members. I mean, you had in the Trump administration, you had an administration that wanted to roll back overtime protections, that sort of abandoned workers during the pandemic. They are running on a platform, and if you look at Project 2025, it is just full of policies that will really hurt working people. I mean, for example, they actually say the quiet part out loud in that report, that they want to roll back child labor protections. How can anybody running on that ticket say that they care about working people if they want to encourage young people to go into dangerous jobs? So, you can say, J.D. Vance can say what he wants to say, but I think if you compare the records of the Biden-Harris administration and then what the Trump administration did last time they were in power and what they've told us they're going to do next time, it's bad news for working people, whether they're in a union or not.
Well, Sharon, the fact of the matter is Kamala Harris is still trailing Donald Trump, and in some cases significantly when it comes to matters of the economy, even in our own Bloomberg swing state poll, which includes Michigan and Wisconsin, where we're finding these two candidates today. When it comes to how do you handle the stock market, who do you trust more when it comes to interest rates, the price of goods, and the price of services? Donald Trump was anywhere from 5 to 7, almost 10 points ahead of Kamala Harris. So what's the message here? Because we're talking about potentially an economic slowdown this week, a stock market that's starting to look wobbly. Does Kamala Harris deserve to carry Joe Biden's economic baggage with her in this campaign?
Well, I think the Biden-Harris administration has a strong record. We all know there are moments of volatility, but I think if you look at the record of this administration over 3.5 years, I think it's a record that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to be very proud to run on. If you look at the number of jobs created, if you look at how much inflation has come down, I mean, just remembering what it was like at the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, the sort of crisis that this country was in, that our economy was in. So I think it's an incredibly strong record that she's going to be proud to run on. And again, you just have to go back and look at how the Trump administration treated working people. I think people don't live the stock market. They live, how much do they get paid? Do they have a job? How are their communities doing? And I think when they look at those kinds of issues, I mean, just on job creation, this administration has a record that is second to none. I think that's when people have to make this decision, that's what's going to be important to them.
Well, in our final moment with you, Sharon, as we talk about job creation, those numbers are going down. We saw a very soft jobs report on Friday and a higher unemployment rate that caused people to throw the word growth scare around. Given your knowledge of the labor market in the U.S., are you worried that things are going to turn in a more material way in these final months leading to November?
I'm really not. I mean, this summer we can see some volatility. Again, we're adding jobs in the last jobs report just last week. And if you look at the average over the past few months, we're still seeing strong job growth. And the uptick in the unemployment rate, I mean, again, we want everybody who wants to have a job to be able to have a job, but you get to an increase in the unemployment rate in two ways. Either because people have lost jobs or because more people are coming into the economy looking to have a job who hadn't had one before. That's what we saw in the July job numbers. And that's an important distinction. I think people want to come in to get jobs because they see that this is an economy that has been growing, where people have been getting jobs. And so I think it's way too soon to be talking about a trend that is different than the really strong trend that we've seen throughout the Biden administration on job creation.
Well, we really appreciate a great conversation, Sharon. It's good to have you. Professor of Practice at Harvard Law School, Executive Director of the Center for Labor and a Just Economy at Harvard, former labor advisor to the Biden White House. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.